Are you feeling lost in the digital wilderness? Welcome to Lost in Siberia. We are your guide to navigating the world of cyberspace.
So whether you're a tech enthusiast or you're looking to land your first job in InfoSec, we're here to break things down into bite-sized pieces so that you don't have to.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Lost in Siberia. We really hope you enjoyed our first episode. In this episode, we discuss whether you actually need to be technical to work in cybersecurity and how skills we learned working in hospitality translates to any industry. We're not going to waste any time, so let's jump back into it with part 2. I just did a course on network and computer communication, and I hated networks. Absolutely hated it. I just found it so abstract.
But it's important.
Yes, I knew it was important. And usually I love everything I study. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. And I went with an attitude, okay, I have to do it. And I ended up really liking it because in the end, I did a project about every single layer of the networking stack, just how the way the internet works, basically. I've simulated a real attack. I didn't attack anything. I did it within a home environment, and I used a virtual machine or virtual machines. And it was so easy to, when you have access to the same network, to first of all see everything the person is doing, to be able to spoof their devices. So to, for instance, to act like someone's camera with your laptop or with your phone, and then have access to all that information. And it was too easy. And it's scary, I know, but it's also exciting. So if you do want to get into tech, I think it does give you that different perspective where you go, well, if I can do it, without much background, without a year or 2 years of studies.
Yeah.
What
Totally.
can a person do with 10 years experience that gets paid?
Yeah.
And then you start looking at the world very differently and you go, well, what actions can I take to make sure people take actions to protect themselves, right? Yeah, it could be definitely a barrier, but you can still get in the industry and learn it on the go.
Yeah, I think that's a thing, right? Because you can learn on the job. I think a lot of people that I speak to who ask me, oh, because I didn't study cybersecurity, how did you get into it then? And yeah, sometimes I have to even think of myself. I'm like, yeah, how did you get into this? I just kind of ended up here. When I tell people that I studied a bachelor's arts, majoring in art history, and they go, okay, so how are you in cybersecurity then? It doesn't really logically make sense, but yeah, I think a lot of people get hung up on thinking, oh, I need to do all these certifications before I get a job and a lot of that comes down, the problem is a lot of these job ads do specify specific certifications, right? That do you have this, CompTIA Security Plus, for example, or CISP? Yeah, exactly. They're often listed on these job ads. So people look at them and go, oh, okay, well, I have to do all these certifications in order to get this job. And then it'll be we're looking for entry-level person. You need 5 years experience. You're going, okay, but how do I get the experience if I don't have a job? And, obviously it's just this vicious cycle.
Certifications need experience too. A lot of them, not the entry-level one, but the higher ones.
And I think my advice would be don't pay for the certs. Get your job to pay for it.
Yeah.
Get your workplace to pay for it. Just find a way to get that first job.
Yes.
Just maneuver your way in somehow.
Yeah.
Just slide in between the cracks. For me, getting my first cybersecurity job, I had a grad role when I decided that I wanted to move into more of a tech role. Well, I guess, even going back before that, what piqued my interest in wanting to work in tech was I went back to uni, and when I was living in Melbourne, I did a graduate degree in journalism. And that's actually how I became interested in tech, which is a bit strange. But anyway, one of the courses that I was doing was on data journalism. We got taught how to tell stories through data. And I was going, that's interesting. I never thought about being able to do that. And then, our professor telling us, look at, how much data is there out there? There's so much data. No one's looking at it, but there's so many stories to tell, looking at all this data. And I'm going, oh, maybe I should become a data journalist. That would be cool. And then one of my assignments I did for that class was I interviewed women who worked in tech, not in cybersecurity, but in various tech roles. And, they're all telling me, how much they love their jobs and how much they enjoy working with computers and how they get paid well, the conditions are good, like blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, why have I never thought about working in tech? And a lot of them I found interesting was, and I felt the same way when they said this, was I never got told at school I could do this. Like I never was told that this is a career that you could pursue when I was at school, because I don't know if it's the same for you, but like when I was in primary school, we had 1 hour a week where we had computer class, which was in the library, I think. And from memory, there weren't even enough computers for the amount of students in the class. And I went to a pretty small primary school too, so we didn't have like heaps of kids. And I remember you go into computer class and we play around on Word or something, and you play around with Clippy and put like pictures and stuff. And then I remember like when you'd make like weird cover pages where you have all the weird like rainbow fonts and stuff, which is, you know, massive throwback. You grew up in the early 2000s slash late 90s, like I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, that was like my whole interaction with computers at school. And then in high school, it never got any better either. But looking back, I had always been interested in computers. Like my dad bought my first, I remember, strawberry iMac when I was 7 years old. I was really excited because it was so pretty. And remember, you could see inside the computer. Like you were like, oh, cool, I can see what a computer is. Like how, and it was, you know, because Apple computers were also, back then, I remember, was really unusual compared to Windows, was that you didn't have the massive like drive next to it. You just had the computer and that was it. And then you had your mouse and keyboard and that was all. And yeah, I remember loving that computer and using it all the time. I'd go after school, as long as I finished my homework, I could go on my computer and play games, and grew up playing The Sims, SimCity and all that kind of stuff. And I remember I also, because I was an only child, so I didn't have siblings and stuff, and I think maybe that's why I also spent a lot of time on computers. But I remember I think like my dad had a CD-ROM, and it was, you know, back in the day we used CD-ROMs, on like how to learn how to type. And I think I was just bored during school holidays once, and it was just one of those things where you played games. So if you didn't type the word fast enough, it would like explode or something. So you were like trying to type all the words quickly before the words exploded. And that's how I learned how to touch type. And even now I notice I type really fast compared to a lot of people. And that's literally how I learned how to touch type, was just through playing games. So yeah, it's interesting, you know, going back to moving into cybersecurity. When I did that story and I learned, and I was like, oh, wow, all these women are talking about working in tech and it's really interesting. Why have I never thought about this? And then when I graduated, I nearly actually took a grad role at a newspaper as a cadet journalist.
Yeah.
But I was really umming and ahhing about taking it, and I thought, is this what you want to do? Because I'm like, if I go down this path, I'm not going to turn back, right? Like from here, I want to probably give it a go for a couple of years to see if this is what I want to do. And I think journalism for me at that time, I thought, it's a hard job. You put in a lot of work, you've got to do a lot of overtime, because you're often working on weekends, nights to get those stories, right? Because that's when you need to talk to people and get those stories out, and the deadline sometimes really crazy. And at that time I wasn't sure if I wanted to move out of Melbourne. Yeah. And I thought, and I would have had to buy a car if I was going to go move into, middle of whoop whoop. And I thought, nah, I don't think this is the right decision for me. So yeah, I ended up staying in Melbourne. I decided to do a data science certificate. So learned, the basics of using R and Python. I love data visualization, right? Because that's what I was like thinking about becoming a data journalist. I was like, yeah, I want to tell stories like through data. So I did this story about looking at traffic, because Melbourne has sensors throughout the city or at traffic intersections of foot traffic. And I thought, it would be interesting to compare foot traffic during COVID versus a year ago. So I did that as a story, and I did all these very pretty things using Python and stuff and looking at foot traffic patterns. So yeah, and that's how I just got interested and decided I wanted to work in tech. And then I applied for a grad role at Accenture, and the following year I moved into that role. And yeah, that was how I pivoted into working in tech. And then it was at Accenture where I decided that cyber was more what I wanted to do. So when I was at Accenture, I was doing software testing with a federal government client. And even though it wasn't as, I guess, as exciting as I was expecting it to be. But looking back, I actually, the longer I was away from that role, I realized that I actually had learned a lot of things that have really helped me a lot in even currently, because I learned to work in an agile software development team where I was a software tester, and I worked with software devs, developers, I worked with business analysts, we had a scrum master, and it was very much working in those 2-week sprints of, okay, what are we achieving in this time? You know, we need to continuously push to production. We need to get stuff out. We need to test. We need to make sure it's secure, like blah, 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 all that stuff. So I think looking back, I did learn a lot in that job because it really was my first exposure to what it was like to work in a software development team. And and I think like moving into cyber and thinking back to how I landed my first role, I think for me it was showing enthusiasm. You know, what can I do? How can I move into your team? Like, you know, when I was within that company, trying to find ways like, okay, what can I study? And then when Canberra went into COVID again, lockdown again, I joined AWSN. And then that was actually how I got my first role in cybersecurity, because someone had posted on one of the Slack channels that their old manager was looking for a junior cybersecurity analyst to join this startup in Canberra. And I was like, oh, I've just moved back to Canberra. That works out well. And then, got in touch with her. She got me in touch with her old manager. We had a chat. I went for an interview. And even though I didn't have any experience in cyber, they gave me that job because they could tell that I was passionate and that I wanted to learn and that I was willing to, just give it a go and give it a crack. And I think like most jobs that I have gotten have been because like I've never had all the skills that they're looking for, right? No one ever does. But still, I think a lot of people think that they look at a job ad and they go, oh, I've got like 20%. There's no way I could apply for this role. And I think I've always had the mentality of like, I don't have the skills, but may as well apply. So I'm just like, just shoot it out. Just send out the CVs. Like you never know. Like you might get lucky. But I think like you would agree as well that it's often not what you know, it's who you know. Yeah. You need to go out and network. You need to go out and meet people, and that has for me always been the main way I've gotten jobs, is been through people that I know. And that becomes really important, especially now, because obviously the market has changed a lot in the last 12 months. Now is the time when your network becomes so important, because there might not be a lot of jobs out there, but there still are. You just need to hear it from the right people, and you'll find out about jobs, who you know. And I think also networking the right way as well, because I've seen people go to, say, like a conference or a cybersecurity event, you know, just like a panel event or something, and they're not networking. They're just trying to make business deals, or they're trying to just get something out of someone, you know. Like I went to a conference once and I was talking to this girl and she said that she was looking for a job. And I said, oh, okay, cool. Like, good luck. Hopefully you find something through the conference. And then I saw her talking to someone at one of the booths, you know, that had all the merch and stuff. And I saw her go over and talk to this girl, and then she walked away like a minute later. And I said, oh, like, how come you didn't talk to her for that long? And she's like, oh, well, this was in Vegas as well. So she was like, oh, you need US citizenship to work, because I think it was like a government department or something. Okay. And I said, oh, okay. But I said, she's probably still worth talking to, because she might know someone who's looking hiring, right? Like she might know someone in another company. Yeah. And also I think like networking is a long-term investment. Yeah. It's not short-term. Like I don't talk to people with an intention of like, I'm looking to get something out of you, because like I'm not a salesperson. I would be really bad at sales because I'm not good at lying for a start. I'm also not good at selling stuff that I don't like. But I think, you need to go in with an open mind and, just have a chat to people. And I think that people are more willing to help you if they don't feel like you're just trying to get stuff out of them.
100%, yeah. And you will actually get, like the thing I said about friends. But I mean, people will hire you if they like you. If one person you speak to likes you for actually your personality, because you're a good person, And yeah, you have 20% of the skills they need. But then they talk to their other friends and they say, I met this person, I don't know, Jennifer. And Jennifer is really cool, you know, like she's just trying to get into cyber and yeah, she's like doing this, but like she's a really cool person and I think she has a good attitude. And you go further and further. And then somewhere something clicks and someone goes, you know what, I actually am looking for someone with a good attitude. I'm looking for someone that is willing to give it 100%, to just do that, to give that jump into the industry. And people want to help. They know that the industry has a shortage. They actually do want to help. My company is like that. They would like to give people a go. They would like to give people a chance. But if you have an attitude of, well, I'm just not good enough now, and so there is not even a point of trying, you know, there is not even a point of going and talking to that person because that's not going to, you know, lead me where I need to go.
Yeah, a lot of places do hire if they think you're a good fit for the team.
Personality hire. But why not? Why not be a personality hire?
I mean, I would proudly say I think I'm usually a personality hire, if I'm being honest.
It's like...
Which is not necessarily, and it doesn't mean that I don't know how to do the job.
Yes.
It just means that I'm not a robot.
Exactly.
And you'd probably agree that in Canberra, it's actually not that common to, wait, how do I put this diplomatically? There's a lot of people that have been in the same role, or that, you know, like APS, for example, like the public service. There's people who have been in the same job their whole entire life, and that's okay. Like, you know, if that's what you want to do, that's totally cool. But one day, if they go, oh, okay, I think I want to do something else for a change. And there's been so many times where when I've spoken to the people that interviewed me and after I've started working there, and I've always asked, because I'm always curious, you know, to know, why did you hire me? Why did you choose me? Because I know you interviewed a lot of people. The answer has always been because you weren't like a dull, boring robot. Like you actually seem like, and then also the other thing is sometimes lack of experience can work in your favor because you're not set in ways. Someone who's a lot older, who's been doing the same job and the same role, and they always want to do it in the same way, is not always going to work well, especially in a startup, for example, where you need to be agile. You need to change what you're doing very rapidly because sometimes you have to pivot the whole company or the product you're working on. It actually can work in your favor to not be that experienced in whatever role that you've applied for.
I think it's most times. And yes, and so startup is a good example, but think about just the technical industry as a whole and how many different trends. We had the cloud boom, we had the AI boom, and how much it's changing continuously. And so if you start thinking about it from that perspective, you want a person that is very adaptable, that is embracing change.
Yeah.
And that is not something you can get a certification in or teach. Yes. That's an attitude and that's experience. And that doesn't have to be a cyber experience. And you're right, it's even better sometimes when it comes from a different industry.
Yeah.
Because some industries do provide kind of like a better resilience, I guess, to change, or how do I use it like to benefit me as well? And thinking ahead and always like, you know, having that context rather and being a specialist is something is really good. For sure, and they can get a lot of money and they can get a lot of, you know, clout for being who they are. But I always wonder when that particular technology you specialize in is not going to be needed anymore. What do you do then? You know, and so you gotta have that thinking of I need to like also have other skills.
Yeah, and be aware of what those new technologies are. Reading about it, listening to podcasts, going to events. Like networking also doubles as a great way to know what's going on in the industry, just through talking to other people or hearing panel discussions on certain topics you might be interested in, or even topics you don't know anything about and you want to learn more about because you're like, oh, I feel like there's a gap in my knowledge on this area. And yeah, I think the other thing is when it comes to resumes, when people submit their resumes for jobs, I think some people feel like they need to only include stuff that is relevant to that job, which I think maybe nowadays is probably makes more sense because how a lot of resumes now are being run through AI tools and stuff before you even get an interview. But in my experience, a lot of the things I've put on my resume that have stood out in the interview and have actually come up in discussion are things that aren't related to directly to what I have done in cybersecurity. For example, I remember I went for a job interview once where they brought up the fact that I'd studied at Sotheby's Institute of Art in New York for a summer. And they were going, oh, what was that like? How was New York? What did you learn? And I talked about that. And I think it's good talking points as well as a good way to start a conversation, because it also makes you stand out. You haven't just focused on one specific industry as well. And it means that you bring a lot of other skills. Like, for example, I feel like my experience working in communications and digital marketing has helped me in my roles as well, especially from being able to write well, write reports. Because I think that's another thing in cybersecurity. A lot of technical people don't know how to write well. I think that's the bar for entry to that's probably gotten easier now with like a lot of AI assistant tools that are in even like within SIEM tools now, or within threat intelligence platforms and stuff like that. So I think that's made it a bit easier for them to spit out a report. But even so, it's always good to be able to write well and speak well, because you still have to give a present, like people are going to have to give presentations at some point as well. Robot to do that for you.
Maybe one day.
Hopefully, maybe that's in the near future. I don't know.
But it's also like you're using a tool still. And every time you're using a technological tool, like we just discussed, right? That's also bringing in a security risk. I just think it's also something to remember. And if you work in an environment where adding that security tool, adding an AI tool and adding that extra risk is not advisable, like let's say some kind of a federal government environment, then if you are technical, you still need to have that skill.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you want to do some of that cool stuff, or any kind of commercial in confidence or any kind of sensitive information, I would probably, with the way AI is right now, and because the data is often going to overseas centers because of how much CPU that these data centers need to process one simple prompt or simple query, you still need to know where the data is going. And so anytime you do use AI to help you with writing a work report or something that is connected to sensitive information, and I don't know how well that can be mitigated.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, like you said, where's the data going? I had a friend recently who told me that she went to see her psychologist, and the psychologist asked her, do you mind if I record this session so that I can easily write my notes afterwards? And she said no, which makes sense because she works in government. And, she's obviously smart enough to know, well, what is this tool? Where's this information going? If this ever got leaked, this is my personal medical information, right? Seeing a psychologist, you're literally telling them your most deepest, darkest, trauma. You don't want that shit online.
No, you don't. No.
So and it's stuff like that. But when I thought about it, and I thought, obviously the psychologist had to ask for permission before she could do that. But also, imagine the amount of people who wouldn't know the risks of that and have said yes, and they're having all their psychology sessions recorded, and you don't know who has access to this information.
What is happening with that particular data? And it also doesn't make sense to record the whole session. It's probably you would like to have a tool that has kind of a selective thing or has some way of anonymizing information. And I don't think these tools are doing that. So, and there are a lot of them in meetings as well now. So, and people started asking, but I had a few times where people just show up with their AI recorder and they just don't ask. And then you realize halfway through the meeting and you go, wait a second, what is this?
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that I think when you change your mindset to thinking this way, you start seeing it everywhere as well. But we were talking about, they're writing, I think, right? There is a Deakin cybersecurity club that they want to form. So there's a cybersecurity club in my university that they want to form.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot of hard work, and they would like me to, do some stuff on cyber essentials, because they asked me for my opinion, because they wanted to do a lot of cool stuff. Now they want to do cool stuff in cyber, and they want to do a lot of pen testing. So I told them, pen testing requires you to write a lot of reports about what you do.
It's a lot of writing.
And one of them told me, if you are the best pen tester in the world, you're going to have someone else to do the writing for you. And I was like, but how would you become the best pen tester in the world?
You need to get there first.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was saying to them, it's all very cool what you're doing. It's very cool to do CTFs and all of that, and learn how to code. But you're forgetting that you're going to be working in the real world, and you need to present that information, and you need to learn how to write. You need to learn how to present information in a coherent way, in a way that people understand, and that they not just understand what you say, they also understand what you are meaning and what they need to do and what actions you need to take.
Yeah, I think that's a thing I've noticed too, right, is a lot of people who write these reports, they're not looking at the bigger picture. Often the wording is so technical, and you're like, you read sentence, you've read it 3 times, and you're going, oh, what does that mean? Like, it's just jargon.
Yes.
And then you go, if I'm the exec, like I'm, say you're in a government department and, the EL2's coming, is the one who's going to be looking at the report. And from that report is then going to be deciding, okay, this is what we need to this is how we get funding because we need to do X, Y, and Z. And then you read the report and you go, okay, how does this impact the business? Why is this important to us? Why should we be doing this? What are the risks if we don't do it?
Yes.
That's how those people then go off to get funding and then get people to do the project, to actually implement whatever it is that you're doing. Or say if it's a pen test and we need to remediate all these things because these are the potential attack vectors. These are how people could be potentially attacking your environment. Yeah, I think a lot of people, then that's again going back to why being able to write well, but not only write well, but understand the context of why you're writing something. Why is this important to the client? Why is this important to us? For example, if you come in to do the pen test, but then say you work for a company that also has people that can come in and then remediate all those issues, and then you can go, okay, well, here's another piece of work for us as well, and this is how we get more business.
Yes.
So yeah, it works both ways.
Yeah. And having that context comes from not just doing technical things. And I think that's where the phrase of you don't need to know how to code comes in. I think it's just been misconstrued a bit because you need to know business context, as you said. And when you think about risk assessments and things like that, I think when I first thought about a risk assessment, I thought, oh my God, this is so boring. I don't want to do this. When I started actually getting...
Same.
And I looked at all this tables and the colors, and I'm like...
Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, what is this? And then you get into it. And then when you realize that this is the driver for your client or for an organization to actually implement a certain security control, to actually invest, either it is it could be more money in the budget, it could be more people, it could be just, doing things differently. And this is your way of showcasing that. And you can actually make that happen. And being able to, first of all, not just write about that, but understand that. Understand what does the client or the organization you're working for needs. That is I hate the term soft skill, right?
Yeah.
But that is a soft skill, people say, that comes to you with that experience of being that all-rounder, of doing other things, of having a life outside of technical cyber, of working in a journalism industry. That will give you that perspective. Working in a customer service, that will give you that perspective.
Going back to your hotel experience as well, and I think the same for having worked a long time in hospitality. So most of my odd jobs that I had through uni and even after when I went back to studying, when I needed extra money, I would always end up working back in hospitality because obviously I had plenty of experience. I actually quite enjoyed it as well. There was a lot of aspects of working in hospitality that I enjoyed. And yeah, I think everyone in their life should have at least worked in hospitality or retail at some point, because you will deal with all kinds of people.
Yes.
And that can be both good and bad. But it gives you the skills to be able to handle so many different situations.
Yes.
And you have to think on your feet really fast. And it's funny because I feel like sometimes in roles that I have now, my current role or just other cyber roles I've had or in other industries I've worked in, when people talk about stress at work, and I just think I'm and I obviously I don't work in incident response or anything, so I understand obviously there's a different level of needing to respond to something quickly. But in the roles that I've had, the level of stress that I've experienced compared to when I worked in hospitality can't be compared. There is nothing more stressful than you having 8 tables that are all waiting for their food, and you're dealing with hungry people and they're waiting for their cocktails or they're waiting for their food, and the chef's yelling at you because you got one of the orders wrong. I think that the experience that I learned in hospitality has really helped me in every role I've ever had. And like also having the confidence as well, because you have to like it. Obviously there's different kinds of hospitality jobs, but it is a very like, you have to really present yourself well, especially if you're working in a very fancy restaurant or you're working as a bartender, you know,
front desk.
And you have to learn to, if you don't know, you've got to make it up. Like you can't not know.
I think we have actually been given trainings on body language. That helped me so much. The way that you present your hands, the way that you hold your head, the way that you move your eyebrows. And I think when you work for a really fancy hotel, it's even more noticeable. There is some gender attributes that I'm not going to go into, but it's that kind of smiling, that attitude of, yes, I can help you. The thing is anticipating. So it's the anticipatory service, right?
Yeah.
And that's what the big accent is on. So before even the person starts talking to you and you assess them on the way they look, the way they talk, what they're doing. And sometimes like I got to a stage when I would know who I think they are from like my remaining check-ins, or the people, or like if you have a VIP list, I know who they are just because of all the attributes that I'm able to assess.
Yeah.
And I know that they need like, I don't know, a roll-away bed or a dinner reservation or something like that. And I know, and you take that, and I think the ability to translate that into whatever you want, whatever industry you want to get into, and say, I'm so good at anticipating what you will need, and I can say, for a risk assessment, like I can translate that into that.
Yeah.
As well. And I agree with the stress bit. It's like hotels have this thing, and I don't know if everyone knows it, it's not a secret, but they overbook. So they go above 100% occupancy. And that's because people no-show.
Is that a common thing?
Yes. So,
so they're anticipating that a certain number of people won't turn up.
Yeah.
So what happens if it's full?
Wow. What happens if it's...
Is it like, I've never seen this in an Australian flight, but I've definitely heard of this happening in the US where the plane's been overbooked and then they have to give them, if anyone is willing to not catch this flight, we'll give you a voucher for...
So it's okay if you work in a chain of hotels, because then you just talk to each other and they can kind of like send guests to other places.
Oh, gotcha.
So like if you work in Crown, it's kind of okay because...
you've got 3 hotels in the same building.
And so you are, especially like when you work night shift, and that's probably relevant to incident responder shift work, and you are the person that is in charge of the whole hotel, and you are sitting at all your rooms are occupied, and you have 3 more check-ins that haven't showed up yet, but they could at any stage, at any moment now.
In the middle of the night. You're going to do. Like turn up at 3 a.m,
One of them is it's a honeymoon couple. So they are getting married now. So there's probably a big chance they are going to show up. And 2 others like from booking.com, so there's a chance they won't, right? And like you have a room that you could potentially sell, but it's a smoking room.
I imagine a lot of people would be annoyed.
And the level of thinking of on your feet and having that backup of like knowing that something could happen, it's definitely helped me in every aspect of my life. Able to deal with that, and also being able to explain that situation to another person while protecting the brand, protecting yourself, and still helping the other person. It's tough.
It is, when tables get overbooked. And then someone hasn't checked the reservations list and they've just gone and sat someone who's walked in off the street, and you've gone, hang on a minute, we've got 2 bookings coming at 8:30. Where are they going to sit? They booked like 2 months ago. We can't turn them away. And then you're going, okay, you start playing like, Tetris with the tables and going, okay, where can we seat them? And then one of them specifically reserved a window table or something because it's someone's birthday or whatever. Who knows what occasion it is. And you have to deal with so many. I used to work in this really fancy French restaurant. This lady came in and it was her son's birthday. They hadn't booked a table or anything. And she goes, oh, I've got this cake. Can you bring it out, saying happy birthday, blah, blah. And my friend said, yep, no worries. Just so you're aware, we have a cakeage fee, blah, blah, blah. I got explained to her. She was, no worries. And then anyway, my friend, I think they just had their mains. And so, next was going to be dessert. I think the son had gone to the bathroom and the lady just said to my friend, like, oh, can you come out and sing happy birthday for him? And she said, oh, we don't really we're not actually required to do that. Like, it's actually not part of our job. And she didn't say it in like a rude way. She just said, oh, it's just, I don't feel comfortable singing happy birthday, which is like kind of fair enough.
Yeah.
Like, we're not dancing monkeys, you know.
Yes.
We're here to serve you food. And then anyway, so this lady got really annoyed that she refused to sing happy birthday, that she ended up not having the cake with us and ended up asked for the cake back, and they ended up going somewhere else just so someone else could sing happy birthday to her son. Yeah, and that's the thing. My friend even spoke to our manager. My manager even went over to the lady and explained to her. And also, like, they hadn't booked a table in advance, right? It wasn't in the notes saying, oh, requests happy birthday to be sung or whatever. And I know it doesn't sound like a massive deal, but also, you know, it's actually not part of her job.
No.
And we're going back to being prepared for any situation. Yeah, you just don't know who you're going to be dealing with. You just don't know what's going to happen. No. And the same working Crown, in the same building, there's a lot of wealthy people who, how do I put this in? There's a lot of cashed up bogans. Like, I'll just say that. There's a lot of cashed up bogans. Yeah. They go to these fancy places, not like, you know, there's a level of behavior that is obviously expected in a fancy place. Yeah. I have seen people literally vomit on tables in the restaurant because they've come straight from the races. You know, it's spring carnival season, people coming straight from the races. They're coming to have a nice, I don't know who's booking a fancy meal at a restaurant after being at the race all day, drinking champagne, but it's happened. Or we used to have this thing on Sunday mornings where it was a 2-hour bottomless brunch, and we were serving actual champagne. Like, it wasn't sparkling wine. Oh, yeah. You know, it was like the real thing. French champagne, delicious, obviously. So I can understand why you'd be taking advantage of that when you're paying, I think it was $100 and something per person. But when you take into account, you're getting, I think, 2-course meal plus unlimited French champagne. That is a very good deal.
Some champagne, it's like a bottle will be more than $100.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, just like people just going absolutely nuts and like bonkers and just drinking so much to the point where they're like, this lady literally vomited, and she was sitting next to the window and she vomited on the window, and there was another couple on the other side of the glass. No. Like, thank God there was glass between them, because this would have not ended well. But the other couple was on the promenade, like sitting outside. Yeah. This lady's on the inside of the glass and she's just projectile vomited onto the glass. And then it's not only projectile vomit, the couple was obviously so shocked, but then it's ricocheted off the window back into her face.
No.
So anyway, I think we're getting off topic now.
No, but like, imagine you bring this experience in an interview and they ask you, can you give us an example of a time
where you had to deal with a difficult situation?
With everything going wrong, you know, everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and how did you deal with that? Yeah. I think if I was an interviewer and I heard that, I was like, yeah, that person can do it.
Yeah, they can deal with anything going on here.
Yes, anyone who remained cool in that situation and went,
yep, let me just go grab a bucket.
Yes. Hope you're okay. This is some water. Speak to the other couple. Figure it out. You know, bring some dessert for the other couple.
Exactly.
And take the lady
we need to get these two out ASAP.
ASAP, you know.
Security, call security.
Yes. And even then, right, you have to have a report about what happened, what did you do, and all of that. Like, I mean, I feel like people see hospitality and they think that the skill set that is required is like minimal, but I think so many of my friends that I worked in hotels went to be like in business, executives, because they can do that.
Yeah.
And so that's why I have a lot of issues with, first of all, people being rude to like service men. Like, why would you ever? That doesn't make any sense.
Totally.
They literally deal with your foods or your rooms. Like, why would you want to anger those people?
Yeah.
But also, you probably don't have any idea of like the amount of skill set required to do that job.
No.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, right? I've had a lot of hospitality jobs, when people don't have those skills, they don't last.
No, they don't.
Because it's cutthroat, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, and actually it's very timely because there's been a lot of articles that come out in the news about hospitality chains in Sydney. There are a lot of issues in the hospitality industry. Like, they're talking about sexual harassment and all these other things that happen. It's really cutthroat. Like, you're getting yelled at, and you're not going to your HR manager to complain about it, because if you complain about it, you don't have a job tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also like what I talked about, you know, being a personality hire. And it's like when I was hiring people for my team, yes, I looked at their skill set, but I also looked at, will they vibe with my team? Because a good team is actually going to make a service good, right?
Yeah.
You know, when you work with a certain amount of people, you're like, certain people, you're like, and you know that your day is going to be good, right?
Yeah.
And so when I was like hiring people, yes, I would have people that didn't have hotel experience, like they would come from like working in a checkout in Woolworths or something, but I can see their personality and I know that they will vibe with the other people in the team. I know they will learn everything and they'll be like also so grateful to be in the industry. Like, you know, like one of my plans here is from a person that I hired, you know, and she was so grateful to me. Like she was working so hard and she was one of the best agents ever just because she was giving that chance, and she had an amazing personality and I could see that through the interview. And so that's another experience that I like to bring into like cyber or any industry, you know, when people interview you and you've been in the other position, if you can ever do that, that is such a good thing to have, and to know how people act in interviews as well, which is very different from what they are really. But being able to assess a person and then meeting so many people in hospitality kind of gives you that eye for honesty, for who people really are, for who they pretend to be, which is important, I think, in cyber, especially if you work with different clients as well.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It's a very good skill to have.
Yeah, those client-facing roles particularly important to, like you said, having that experience from whether it's working in hotels or hospitality or retail where you are always client-facing. I'll take another example where being in a good team, like you said, is so important because who can pick up the slack if someone's sick or someone has had a family emergency or, you know, it's being able to know each other so well that, and I think particularly in hospitality, and it's probably the same for hotels, when you know each other so well and you're friends outside of work, you're partying together, you know, every night because it's hospo. Like, you know, you're going out every night after work, you're going out till 3.
Monday night.
Yeah, you know everyone else in the industry, so you're getting free drinks, you're staying out till 5 a.m. and then you're going to work again at 9 a.m. And that's a good example, actually, like when you're so hungover and you go into work and you go, guys, I can't do this. Like, I'm really struggling today. And everyone goes, oh, go upstairs and take a nap and come back in an hour. And, you know, I've been in the position, like same with you, like where you're a supervisor and someone comes in. You know, I've had people come in like wearing the same clothes as they were wearing the day before, and you're going, hang on, have you even been home? Have you had a shower? And you're going, dude, we can't put you on the floor. You smell awful. Well, also, you know, you're like, well, you shouldn't be coming to work when you haven't gone to bed.
No, you shouldn't. But like if you translate it to cyber, and let's say people that work in cybersecurity operations, and like we literally had the CrowdStrike incident, right, where we had like people working 48 hours like non-stop. And as like if you want to be a cybersecurity manager or something like that, imagine how handy that experience of being a supervisor is, dealing with someone that comes hungover to work, wearing the same clothes or something like that. And you go, I know that your normal skill set on a normal day, you operate excellently, but right now you are actually a risk to my operation.
Yes, exactly.
And I need to send you home because, and I might be like one person short, and maybe that will be delayed, but like the damage you can cause with you being in that kind of a position, like it's actually worse.
Exactly. You are a risk to this organization right now because you're not at your best. And I can see that. You need to go sleep. For 2 hours at least, and then come back when you're better. And then when you're actually functional.
Yes, absolutely.
And
you're probably going to be, everyone will enjoy working with you so much more as well. And I think maybe that's kind of that machoism, right? And there's probably a lot of it in any kind of tech industry. And maybe that's another barrier. I think when I heard about cyber, people said something like, it's a stressful job. It's in demand because it's so stressful. People get burnt out a lot and all of that. And I think I kind of went like you, and I was like, really? Like, is it more stressful than, you know, running a hotel? Especially like quarantine hotel. I was like, oh, that was a different level. You know, can it be more stressful? But it's also that other experiences you learn through life. And that's probably not even work or study experience. It's that being that all-rounder. And like, for instance, like doing exercise or having a proper sleep routine, knowing yourself, knowing when are you good and when are you not functioning well, and being able to articulate that.
And also being able to recognize it before you hit your limit
before
as
you hit
well.
Your limit.
And I definitely think personally it's taken a long time to recognize the sign. of when am I burnt out? When am I doing too much?
Yeah.
How do I need to cut back? How can I cut back? Because I know now what my limit is.
Yeah.
But that's taken a while to learn and to understand. Yeah, but being able to identify before you're burnt out is really important because because if you do get to the point where you are fully burnt out, then you're gonna have to take time off work because if it's just exhaustion, you need sleep.
Yeah.
Or whether it's you need time off because your mental health's really bad.
Yeah.
You need to go to the gym. You need to go get that dopamine hit.
I don't know, garden or something, or just like stare at a ceiling for 3 hours.
Yeah. My body's through too much that I'll get sick. I'll be run down, so my immune system's low, and then I'll get sick. And that's never good. And no one likes being sick. So it's being able to identify before you reach that limit.
Yeah. And I think you can sell that. You can sell that in an interview. Because I think they will ask you questions. It depends on what role you go for. But let's say you're going for a stock analyst role in a shift work or something like that, or you're going for a really fast work environment. And you can say, people that you will interview, they will say, I'm going to give you my blood, sweat, and tears. And you say,
okay, I don't know if I've ever said that.
Okay, not in those words, but they will say things that imply that. Yeah. They will say, I'm a hard worker, and this is all of this, attestations.
Put my body on the line.
Yes, exactly. I will cover for everyone.
Yeah, I can take on anything. Yes. I'm Superman / woman.
And I think if I heard that as an interview, I would go, well, maybe they should go and say, oh, wait a second, because that's a really fast way to burn out, which is a risk. So I think you can sell that and say, well, I am also a really all-rounded person, and I have done a lot of work on myself and recognizing my own abilities and my own limitations and my boundaries. So I fit into working into this fast-paced environment because I can tell you when I'm getting to that burnout, and I know when to step out.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Lost in Siberia.
We'll catch you next time.
Bye.